I am now absolutely delighted that Jane Fonda, our keynote speaker, is with us today. Jane is a two-time Academy Award-winning actor who last week won the Cecil B. DeMille Award at the Golden Globes. Her career has spanned over 50 years with more than 45 wonderful films and awards that include 7 Golden Globes, and with crucial work on political causes, including women's rights, Native Americans, and the environment. She will next be seen in the 7th final season of The Wonderful Grace and Frankie. Currently, Jane is leading the climate charge with passion and vision with Fire Drill Fridays, a national movement to protest government inaction on climate change. Her latest book, What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action, describes her personal journey with the movement and provides solutions for communities to combat the climate crisis. And it is a book that resonated very strongly with me. Go buy it. Jane, thank you so much for being with us here today as we discuss the deep need for urgency and awareness of the climate crisis.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate being invited to speak to the DNC Climate Council. Let me get personal. I was really depressed in 2019 because while I'd done all the right things as an individual to reduce my carbon footprint, I knew it wasn't enough. You know, individual action is the on-ramp. It's not the end point. But what to do? I'm famous, I have a platform, but I didn't know how to use it strategically. And then I read Naomi Klein's book about the Green New Deal. Her clarity in discussing the science and letting us know that while time is running out fast, scientists say we can make it if we act fast. It motivated me to call Greenpeace and ask their help in mounting an action, not so much aimed at the government, but aimed at the apparently 25 million Americans who are alarmed by the climate crisis but haven't done anything. Because, according to the Yale Climate and Communications Program, nobody asked them. I wanted to ask them. The 2018 International Panel on Climate Change said that climate change is a collective crisis demanding collective action on a scale that humanity has never actually accomplished. We need large numbers of people working together for solutions that work for climate, for workers, and for our communities. There's such a gap between what the science says is needed and what governments are doing that in 2019, over 1,500 scientists from more than 20 countries called for civil disobedience, explaining that, quote, "We believe that the continued governmental inaction over the climate and ecological crisis now justifies peaceful, nonviolent protest and direct action, even if this goes beyond the bounds of the current law." So I moved to DC to launch Fire Drill Fridays, to reach and inspire people who are alarmed but don't know how to get involved. Over the 4 months I was in DC, people came from all over the country, willing to engage in civil disobedience and risk arrest. The vast majority had never done it before. We've continued Fire Drill Fridays virtually since last year, and in 2020, around 9 million viewers attended all across the whole platforms. Leading up to the election, they volunteered by the thousands to text and call the climate voters who had sat out the previous election, and also before the Georgia runoffs. You know, it's quite clear to me, and the data backs me up, that people really care now about climate, and that when we can protest again in person, they're going to show up in unprecedented numbers to demand action from our elected officials. What scientists are saying is very clear, virtually unanimous, and it's going to be very, very difficult. But hundreds of millions of lives hang in the balance with every half degree of warming we either enable or avoid. Okay, so what did the science say we have to do? 1, we have to prevent any new fossil fuel projects. No more investments in fossil fuel extraction or infrastructure. 2, we must cut our fossil fuel emissions in half by 2030. It's 1 decade if we are to maintain warming levels at 1.5 degrees Celsius. And 3, we have to begin a gradual managed phase out that will bring us to zero emissions by 2050. And we need to do this in a way that safeguards fossil fuel dependent workers and communities. Okay, so here are the crucial and pretty dramatic facts. Globally, we have more already developed reserves of fossil fuels than we can burn and stay within the goals set by science. In other words, continuing just the existing fossil fuel operations, never mind new ones, blows our remaining carbon budget. There's no wiggle room to be adding new fossil fuel production projects if we want to stay at 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's the goal. Now, I hope I don't lose you by showing this graph from Oil Change International, but it clearly demonstrates what I'm saying. You see the orange column on the right, that's 2 degrees Celsius. That was the original goal set at the Paris Climate Treaty, but the scientists are saying things are warming too fast. That would be catastrophic, the 2 degrees. We have to keep warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's the column in the middle. And then on the left, you see the already developed coal, gas, and oil reserves. That's what's already been developed. Look what happens if we use that, if we burn that. We totally go past our carbon budget. It's quite a challenge, isn't it? But we have to do this. And renewable energy is ready to step up. The price of solar and wind power and storage batteries has dropped a dramatic 50 to 100 years ahead of what the International Energy Agency was forecasting only 10 years ago. Mark Jacobson, the director of Stanford's Atmosphere Energy Program, has calculated how almost every country on Earth could go to 80% renewable energy by 2030. Our challenge is getting rid of fossil fuels. And the other challenge is political. Now, climate activists in the US are pinching themselves over what the newly inaugurated Biden administration is doing to address the climate crisis. You know, in just 50 days, what he's done is just amazing. I mean, who would have thought that our first climate president would be Joe Biden? But we should keep in mind that his brave new stances are the results of years of climate activism, protests, strikes, marches, lobbying, civil disobedience, and unrelenting series of extreme weather events, fires and floods. And all of these things have put the climate front and center, along with the pandemic and an economy in crisis, has helped move President Biden from an establishment, fear of deficit spending and big government politician to possibly becoming the, quote, first truly post-Reagan president, as Michelle Goldberg wrote in the New York Times on January 28th. The president's statements and appointments are real reasons for hope. He seems to be committed to addressing the climate crisis, the economic crisis and jobs crisis, and the racial injustice crisis collectively, right? Not sequentially. And this is really critical. Moreover, his White House National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy, said recently, quote, "Climate is a racial justice issue, and solving it advances justice and creates union jobs," unquote. Now, this statement is immensely reassuring because it's imperative that justice and job creation be at the center of Biden's climate rollout. I mean, how many fossil fuel jobs are already being cut by industry decline? But we can lessen the pain if climate and labor groups work together. Now, fortunately, the green energy sector is far more job intensive than the fossil fuel industry. But see, the salaries are not on a par with the largely unionized fossil fuel industry. And this means that in giving financial support to the clean energy economy, the federal government needs to demand that the new jobs be family supporting union or union equivalent jobs, and that they are available as soon as the fossil fuel workers begin to transition. No space in between. This is what's being done in Germany with coal workers. Working families and communities deserve to know that fighting climate change won't result in unemployment or a reduced standard of living. And solar panels and wind turbines aren't the only jobs available in the new green economy. There are tens of millions of workers needed to build electric fast rail systems and charging stations for electric vehicles, not to mention the workers needed to rebuild our dangerously decaying storm management and fresh water delivery systems, and to retrofit millions of homes and office buildings to save energy and make them resilient to extreme weather events. These things have been needed for well over a decade. Had prior Democratic administrations been willing to address them, millions of jobs would have already opened up for the unemployed or underemployed citizens who felt betrayed and neglected and decided that Trump at least offered something different. You know, I walked working class precincts in Michigan and Pennsylvania in 2018, and I heard over and over again how the Democratic Party was MIA. Addressing the climate crisis in a way that creates good union jobs, a healthier environment, and prosperity for all is the way for the Democratic Party to really build back better. So this transition needs to start happening now for climate, for justice, and for 2022. You know, if this administration hasn't put people to work in good green jobs by then, don't like to think about it. If Biden does things right, I mean, think about it. The Rust Belt and rural wasteland of the United States can become a thriving union towns with safe, dignified jobs that are simultaneously helping America become strong while combating the climate crisis. Surely President Biden understands these things. He's a good pro-labor guy. And yet he announced the closing of the Keystone XL pipeline without offering a plan for a just transition. Labor and climate activists and Democratic Party activists mustn't let him do this again. You know, that's why Randy's AFT and I work with groups like the Labor Network for Sustainability to bring our movements together to create a just, sustainable economy and environment. President Biden has been clearer when it comes to environmental justice. He's already pledged to direct 40% of climate and clean energy investments to disadvantaged communities that have borne the brunt of fossil fuel pollution for decades, the ones that are deemed sacrifice zones. Now, other things we have to do real quickly. We need to make certain that the Biden administration reinstates the Obama-era export oil ban oil export, and expand it to include gas. You see, absent an oil export ban, declining consumption in the US won't automatically lead to declining production, as the oil and gas can still be extracted and then exported. And since we're all on the same planet, it cancels out a whole portion of the progress made by reducing fossil fuels through electric vehicles and renewable energy and so forth. Now, another thing, the upcoming budget reconciliation process offers an important opportunity for Congress members to finally address the massive subsidies the public is currently paying to prop up the oil and gas industry. I urge you to please seize this opportunity and redeploy those funds to build a clean energy economy. Climate scientists warn that we should not rely on claims that in the future bioenergy with carbon capture and storage will be a solution, but it's going to be pushed real hard. Maybe one possible tool in our toolkit, but the scientists say that instead emergency efforts must be made to bolster and heal the natural systems of carbon drawdown. You know, on land, this means ending deforestation and vast reforestation. It means fundamentally altering our systems of food production from industrial mechanical tilling of monocrops to restorative agriculture, such that soils are once again able to sequester carbon, resist flooding and erosion, and provide healthier food. And this would mean a return of family farming and food democracy. And it's very heartening that the president has committed funding to help farmers make this transition. And Gina McCarthy is there to make sure the Department of Agriculture makes it happen. Ending fossil fuel production, emissions, and the production of single-use plastics will allow our oceans to heal, which will improve their ability to sequester carbon. Now, to accomplish all that needs doing is not a multi-billion-dollar effort. It's a multi-trillion-dollar undertaking, which means we have to get over the idea that deficit spending is bad right now. Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman says, quote, "The new paradigm suggests both that the public debt isn't a major problem and that government borrowing for the right reasons is actually the responsible thing to do." Look, neoliberalism and austerity has to be thrown out. They've had their chance and they failed utterly. HR1, now S1, and the Thrive resolution, which is coming, are essential pieces of legislation to hold on. As writer-activist Naomi Klein says, failure to do these difficult tasks in time is a choice, not an inevitability of human nature. We are not doomed unless we choose to be. And I choose to believe that together with President Biden and his administration, we can get it done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane, for laying out the challenges and the possibilities that lead to a green, sustainable future for all, including in a Rust Belt state like mine. And I am really excited about the incredible intersectional leadership that President Biden is demonstrating. You mentioned Fire Drill Fridays, running short on time, but they've become a highlight of my Fridays. Can you just mention how we can connect and maybe tell us a little bit about tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow, Ben Jealous, who is the president and CEO of People for the American Way, was the youngest president of the NAACP. We're going to be talking about S1, a way to get our voting rights solid and back and stop, the gerrymandering and all kinds of things like that. It's going to be fun and exciting, and I'm so glad you watch us. Thank you.
Oh, I look forward to it every Friday. And I know millions or others are like me. That's going to be a great event. And I'm glad we're going to get to talk together a little more later in the live stream when all the speakers will come together to respond to some of listeners' questions. Thank you, Jane.